My name is Elisa. I'm 34, a freelance journalist living on the outskirts of Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm a single mother to a bright-spirited 6-year-old girl named Freya, the only light in my life ever since my husband, Lukas, died in a tragic train accident 4 years ago. Freya, with her sparkling blue eyes and radiant smile, is the reason I wake up every morning, even though the silence of our empty house often feels suffocating, a constant reminder of what I've lost. On that particular day, I had arranged for Freya to spend the night with her grandmother, Ingrid, Lukas's mother, at an old, weathered farm tucked away in the rural countryside of Zealand. The thought of leaving her in someone else's care, even someone as kind and familiar as Ingrid, tugged at my chest. Yet I knew it would give both of us a rare breath of space, Freya to explore the wide, open fields and me to face the quiet house without the weight of worry pressing on my shoulders. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. I never imagined that this simple decision would plunge me into a nightmare. I had to attend a journalism seminar in Stockholm just one night. Ingrid, Lukas's mother, a stern and cold woman who lived nearly an hour away, had never truly liked me. Her gaze always carried a hint of suspicion, as if she doubted I was worthy of her son. Yet, despite the tension between us, I wanted Freya to maintain a connection with her father's family. Occasionally, I let her visit Ingrid, but she had never stayed overnight. This time, I had no other choice. My sister, who usually looked after Freya, was away on a trip. That morning, I drove Freya to Ingrid's house, carefully packing her favorite toys, a small, worn stuffed rabbit named Snow, a few storybooks, and a list of emergency contacts. Freya's excitement was infectious. She proudly wore her sparkling red boots despite the clear, dry morning. Her laughter filled the car as she chatted about the animals she might see on the farm. I felt a pang of relief, hoping that she would enjoy herself. As I handed her over to Ingrid, I noticed the way her grandmother's eyes flickered, sharp and calculating, before settling into a stiff, formal smile. Freya barely noticed the tension, bounding through the doorway with her tiny backpack bouncing. I waved goodbye, expecting the usual cheerful wave in return. Instead, I felt a shiver run down my spine, an instinctive unease I couldn't shake. Something in the rigid lines of Ingrid's face and the quiet stillness of that old farmhouse whispered caution I couldn't quite name. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, a mother's overprotective anxiety, telling myself I was just imagining shadows where there were none. But as I drove away, Freya's small hand waving through the window, her laughter fading behind me, I couldn't entirely silence the gnawing sense of foreboding. The house stood silent in the morning light, its weathered wood and shuttered windows casting long shadows across the yard. I told myself to stop worrying, that it was just a single night, a harmless visit. And yet, a cold knot of dread coiled in my stomach, a premonition that something unseen had already begun to stir. The next morning, when I returned to pick up Freya, Ingrid's house was unnervingly silent. The usual warmth of a busy farmhouse, the chatter of morning routines, Freya's laughter echoing through the hall, the low hum of a television or the scurry of footsteps across wooden floors, was completely absent. The front door creaked open to reveal Ingrid, her face pale, drawn, her eyes tired and cold. She barely acknowledged me as she stepped aside. "She's in the living room," she said flatly, without inviting me inside or offering any kind of welcome. The words hung in the air like frost, and I felt an inexplicable chill run through me. I walked into the living room and froze. Freya sat curled up on the sofa, clutching Snow tightly, her small body hunched over as though trying to make herself disappear. Her eyes were wide, glazed, and unnervingly empty, a stark contrast to the radiant sparkle I had left behind yesterday morning. I sank to my knees beside her, my heart tightening. "Did you have fun, sweetheart?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady to anchor her in the familiar. Freya nodded weakly, barely moving, and then, almost trembling, she leaned into me. Her voice was a fragile whisper. "Mom, she told me not to tell you about the person in the basement." For a moment, my chest stopped. My mind scrambled to catch up with the words, but a cold, instinctive fear had already taken root. "Who, sweetie?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though every fiber of me screamed to pick her up and flee. Freya's eyes, normally so bright and trusting, were wide with terror, glistening with unshed tears. A girl who's in a locked room. She cries, Mom. She says her hand hurts so much. She doesn't want anyone to see her." The words struck me like a physical blow, each one reverberating through my body with unbearable intensity. I held Freya close, my mind racing. Could a child even invent such a story? My rational mind screamed that perhaps she was imagining things, playing a game of make-believe. But the precision of her account, the girl in a locked room, her cry, the pain in her hand, was horrifyingly specific. Freya was not a child prone to fabrication, certainly not of this kind. Her detail, her fear, the weight in her voice, it all told me this was real. I felt a wave of panic rise, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. "Freya, listen to me," I said softly, stroking her hair, trying to create a sense of safety around us. "You did the right thing telling me. Mommy is here now. No one can hurt you. Do you understand?" Freya nodded against my chest, her small body trembling. She buried her face in my shoulder, as if seeking protection from something I couldn't yet see, from horrors I hadn't yet imagined. My thoughts tumbled in every direction, each one more terrifying than the last. What was Ingrid hiding? Why would she allow something like this? And most importantly, was Freya safe? I looked toward the hallway that led to the basement, and my stomach sank. The memory of Freya's words, the image of the girl locked away, crying and hurt, replayed in my mind like a dark film I couldn't stop. I wanted to run down there immediately, but I needed to stay calm, to think clearly for Freya. Panic would only make her feel more afraid. I took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of fear hammering in my ears. I had to find out the truth without alarming her further. "Sweetheart, do you remember everything you saw? Did she say anything else?" I asked gently. Freya shook her head, clinging tighter to Snow. "No, Mom, she just cries. She doesn't talk to me. She looks so sad. Her hand hurts so much." I felt the sting of helplessness clawing at me. How could Ingrid, this woman I barely trusted, have allowed this? The grandmother I had tolerated, who had always regarded me with suspicion, now harbored a secret so dark that it threatened to shatter our family's fragile peace. And my Freya, my little girl, had witnessed it, innocent, small, yet somehow strong enough to carry the memory. Every instinct screamed that I needed to act, that this could not be ignored. I held Freya close, pressing my lips to the top of her head. The soft weight of her body in my arms grounded me in a terrifying clarity. I would not allow anyone to harm her. Not now. Not ever. I guided Freya back to the car, her small hand clutching mine tightly, and immediately dialed my best friend Clara, a child psychologist based in Copenhagen. As soon as I explained the situation, Clara's voice was calm but firm on the other end. "Elisa," she said, "children do not invent details like this. Freya is telling you about a girl locked away and hurt. She most likely saw something real. You need to act immediately." Her words left no room for hesitation, cutting through the fear and doubt that had been swirling in my mind. Without another thought, I called the police. My voice trembled as I recounted Freya's story, each word feeling heavier than the last. The operator listened carefully, instructing me to stay calm while assuring me that officers would be dispatched to Ingrid's house right away. I hung up, but calmness was impossible. My heart pounded so violently it was almost audible. Every second felt stretched, every shadow on the road exaggerated by my fear. I realized I couldn't just sit and wait. The thought of a young girl trapped somewhere in Ingrid's basement, alone and in pain, clawed at me relentlessly. Against Clara's insistence that Freya stay with her, I made a decision. I had to return to Ingrid's house myself to see for myself to ensure that no harm came to anyone else. I carefully explained to Freya that she would stay safely with Clara, that her mother had to do something important to help someone in danger. Freya hesitated for only a moment before nodding, trusting me as she always did. The drive back to Ingrid's house was a blur of anxiety and dread. I couldn't stop imagining the girl in the basement, huddled in darkness, crying, her hand hurting, alone and terrified. Each thought twisted like a knife in my chest. The familiar Danish countryside passed by almost unnoticed, trees and fields merging into a gray, oppressive backdrop as my mind replayed Freya's description over and over. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white, my pulse racing. By the time I reached the edge of Ingrid's property, a sense of urgency had overtaken everything else. Fear and determination surged through me in equal measure. I had to confront whatever Ingrid was hiding, to protect not only Freya but the girl my daughter had seen. I parked the car and took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling myself for whatever I might find behind those weathered wooden doors. The moment had come, there was no turning back. When I arrived, the house was unnervingly silent, more so than any silence I had ever felt before. Even from the driveway, the weathered structure seemed to exude a cold, oppressive stillness, as though the very walls were holding their breath. I hesitated for only a moment before forcing myself forward. My hand trembled slightly as I knocked on the door, trying to mask my fear with a casual tone. "Freya forgot her favorite sweater," I called out, attempting to make my voice sound light, almost playful. Ingrid opened the door, her expression taut, her sharp eyes narrowing immediately. "I've checked already." "There's nothing," she said, her tone clipped and final. But I refused to be deterred. I needed to see for myself to make sure Freya was safe, and if what she said was true, to protect another girl who might be trapped in that house. I stepped inside, maintaining a polite smile, and began to move deliberately toward Freya's room. Ingrid's face darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line, but I continued, pretending to look for the sweater. As I neared the staircase that led to the basement, a sudden, almost primal scream cut through the air. "Don't you dare go down there!" Ingrid shouted, her voice no longer cold or sharp. It was raw, panicked, laced with fear. I froze, my pulse spiking as I turned to face her. Panic in her eyes was unmistakable, a stark contrast to the usual composed mask she wore. "If Freya isn't supposed to be down there, why are you afraid I'd check?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. I could see the hesitation flicker across her face, the rigid composure cracking under the weight of her fear. Ingrid advanced toward me, her hands clenched at her sides, but then the crunch of tires on gravel outside caused her to falter. The sound, sudden, purposeful, was unmistakable. The police had arrived. Relief and renewed determination coursed through me. I didn't wait for her to react further. I turned quickly, retreating to the driveway where officers were stepping out of their vehicles. I recounted Freya's story to them in hurried, clipped sentences, my words tumbling out as my heart thumped violently in my chest. I described the girl in the locked room, the crying, the hand that hurt, and how Freya had been warned not to tell me. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions serious, professional, yet tinged with the urgency of someone who had heard too many stories of danger but still knew the gravity of the situation. They asked for details about Ingrid's house, the layout, and any possible points of entry to the basement. My mind raced as I recounted the narrow staircase, the locked doors, the peculiar quiet that seemed to cling to the lower levels of the house. Each word I spoke only amplified the dread gnawing at my chest. I could feel Freya's fear resonating in me, her innocence and vulnerability amplifying every instinct that screamed something was horribly wrong. The officers nodded, formulating a plan quickly, their efficiency a small comfort amidst the storm of panic and disbelief. Ingrid remained inside, her figure rigid in the doorway, eyes darting between us and the interior of her house, clearly aware that she could no longer hide anything. And as I stood there, adrenaline surging, a sickening realization settled over me. Whatever was in that basement had already been suffering for too long, and we were about to confront the hidden darkness she had tried so desperately to keep buried. One of the officers, a tall, broad-shouldered man, nodded to his colleagues and spoke in a calm but authoritative tone. "Ingrid, open the basement door," he commanded. Ingrid's face went pale, almost ashen, and she shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin, defiant line. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling ever so slightly, betraying the fear she tried so desperately to conceal. But the officer didn't hesitate. With a swift, practiced motion, they forced the door open. The sound of splintering wood and metal echoed through the house, sharp and final. From the darkness below came noises that made my blood run cold. Metal clanging against metal, muffled screams and sobs that had been silenced far too long. My heart hammered in my chest as I struggled to breathe, the sounds carrying a horror that was almost unbearable. I gripped the edge of the car for support, my knuckles white, feeling as though every second stretched into an eternity. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours, until one of the officers emerged first, his face ashen, eyes wide with the weight of what they had just witnessed. "There's a girl down there," he said, his voice tight, almost choked with disbelief. "She's alive." My legs trembled beneath me, threatening to buckle, and I sank slightly against the side of the car. Relief and terror collided inside me, relief that she had survived and terror for what she must have endured all this time. The officers quickly escorted Ingrid outside, her hands cuffed behind her back. She looked at me with a mixture of contempt and fury, as if I were the traitor who had ruined her carefully maintained control. Her lips curled slightly, a cold sneer that did nothing to lessen the sense of dread she had left behind. And then I saw her, the girl. A frail, trembling figure, barely 12, emerged from the dark stairwell. Her golden hair was matted and tangled, her pale face streaked with tears and dirt, and one arm was bound crudely with a strip of torn fabric, the makeshift sling doing little to protect it. She clutched the hospital blanket the paramedics had wrapped around her, as though it were the only shield between her and a world that had been cruel and unkind. Her body shook uncontrollably, but when our eyes met, a small spark of recognition passed between us. I smiled gently, lowering myself slightly, trying to make my presence comforting rather than threatening. "It's okay," I whispered softly, though she couldn't possibly know the half of the terror she had endured. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." Sophie Larson, her name confirmed by the paramedics, looked at me with wide, frightened eyes, and for a brief moment I thought I could see the tiniest flicker of trust forming in that gaze. The sheer vulnerability in her expression made my heart ache, and I felt an overwhelming desire to shield her, to protect her from everything she had been forced to face. I crouched closer, careful not to overwhelm her, and whispered again, "You're okay now. It's over. I'm here, and you won't have to be alone anymore." The paramedics began to check her over, gently inspecting the arm and helping her adjust the blanket around her. She leaned slightly into my direction, seeking comfort, small movements betraying the exhaustion and fear she had carried for far too long. Her lips quivered as she tried to form words, but nothing came out. Her wide, expressive eyes said everything: terror, relief, confusion, and hope all in one. I looked at the officers, the team of professionals who had risked entering the darkness, and silently thanked them. None of this could have happened without their swift, decisive action. And yet, it was a mother's instinct, a survivor's instinct, that had driven me back into that house, that had pushed me to confront Ingrid's deception. Sophie's gaze stayed on me as she hugged the blanket tighter. I smiled again, quieter this time, hoping she could feel the sincerity behind it. A warm, fragile hope seemed to flicker in her eyes, a sense that, despite everything, she was no longer alone. And in that moment, I knew that Freya's courage in speaking out, and my own refusal to ignore the warning, had saved her life. In the hours that followed, the police began piecing together the full, horrifying story. They revealed that Sophie had been reported missing 4 weeks earlier from a nearby town. She was a quiet, timid child, developmentally delayed and particularly vulnerable to manipulation, exactly the kind of child Ingrid had fixated on. The officers explained that Ingrid had become consumed by an online conspiracy group, convinced that the world was full of dangers that ordinary people could not see. She believed that Sophie needed to be protected from her own family, that the girl's relatives were somehow a threat to her safety. What began as an obsessive attempt at control had escalated into something monstrous. Ingrid had taken the child, hidden her in the basement, and maintained strict surveillance and restriction, all while rationalizing her actions as guardianship. Inside the basement, investigators had found a locked, secret room. The door's heavy, rusted lock had made escape impossible. Within it was a small, folding bed, the mattress thin and worn, and a single dim lamp that cast long shadows across the bare walls. The space was cramped and oppressive, a cage masquerading as a protective chamber. Evidence indicated that Sophie had survived on the bare minimum, small portions of food, water rationed, and minimal human contact. The psychological toll on her had been devastating. Her eyes told stories of fear, loneliness, and confusion that no child should ever endure. I stood beside the paramedics as they examined her, feeling an intense mix of relief and lingering horror. Sophie's small body trembled, but she was alive, her resilience astonishing in the face of such neglect. I couldn't help but think of Freya, my little girl, who had unknowingly played a pivotal role in this rescue. My heart swelled with pride and an overwhelming protective instinct for both girls. Returning home with Freya, I hugged her tightly, feeling the warm, solid weight of her small body against mine. "Freya," I whispered, holding her as if I could shield her from the world's darkness. "The girl in the basement, she's safe now. She's free. And it's all because of your bravery." Freya's eyes, still wide with the residual innocence and awe of what had happened, met mine. Her voice was a soft whisper, almost guilty. "I was scared she would get angry at me, but I knew you would believe me, Mom." I felt tears slip down my cheeks, not from fear, but from the profound realization that I had given my daughter the courage to speak the truth, to trust herself and her mother. In that moment, I understood that Freya's honesty had been a lifeline for another child, that her small voice had carried immense weight. It was a lesson in trust, in listening, in the power of believing what children try to tell us. Ingrid was immediately charged with kidnapping and unlawful confinement. She denied all allegations, her face a mask of indignation and self-righteousness. But the evidence was irrefutable. The basement, the secret room, the witness statements, and most importantly, Freya's testimony combined to create a compelling case that left no room for doubt. Ingrid's obsession with conspiracies and her actions against Sophie's welfare were laid bare, painting a chilling picture of her delusions and the real-world consequences of unchecked obsession. Sophie was reunited with her family, who had been living in anxiety and despair for weeks, desperate for any sign of their daughter. Her mother, a woman whose grief had been palpable since Sophie's disappearance, embraced me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing her. You saved my daughter." I could only nod, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had happened, the way human connection, my trust in Freya's words, the officer's swift response, and the courage of a child speaking up, had converged to rescue an innocent life. The aftermath was a mixture of relief and reflection. Freya and I spent quiet evenings together, wrapped in blankets, talking about bravery, trust, and the importance of speaking out. I realized that this experience, terrifying as it had been, had strengthened our bond in ways I could never have anticipated. It had taught both of us that even the smallest voices could carry tremendous weight, that attentiveness and courage could change lives. Sophie slowly recovered, nurtured by her family's love and the care of professionals who could help her heal. I stayed in contact with them, witnessing the gradual restoration of a child's sense of safety and normalcy. Freya, proud yet contemplative, often asked gentle questions about Sophie, showing the empathy and awareness that only a young child with a brave heart could display. Ingrid, meanwhile, faced the legal consequences of her actions, and the case became a cautionary tale in local media about the dangers of obsession, manipulation, and blind adherence to online conspiracies. Yet even in the midst of the horror, there was hope. The resilience of children, the power of trust, and the capacity for adults to act decisively when lives are at stake. That night, as I tucked Freya into bed, her small hand curling around mine, I whispered, "You did something amazing today, my love. You helped save someone just by being honest and brave." She yawned, eyes fluttering closed, a gentle smile on her lips. In that moment, I understood the true meaning of courage, not the absence of fear, but the strength to act despite it. After everything that had happened, life slowly began to regain a fragile sense of normalcy. Sophie was safely back with her family, her laughter returning in small, hesitant bursts, while Freya and I navigated the quiet aftermath of a terrifying ordeal that had tested our courage, intuition, and trust in one another. I held Freya close more often now, not out of fear, but out of gratitude, for her bravery, for the sharpness of her instincts, and for the way her honesty had saved an innocent life. It was remarkable to witness how a child's voice, often dismissed as too small or naive, could ripple outward and create profound change. Looking back, I realized there were several lessons I had learned, lessons that I wanted to share with others, especially parents and anyone responsible for nurturing children's honesty and self-confidence. First, trust your children when they speak, even when the details seem improbable. Children see the world in ways adults often overlook. Freya's words, her courage to tell me about the girl in the basement, had been the key to saving a life. Never dismiss a child's concerns lightly. Sometimes their small voices carry enormous truth. Second, intuition matters. That uneasy feeling I had when leaving Freya at Ingrid's house, the cold shiver running down my spine, it was not paranoia. Listening to your instincts, especially as a parent or caregiver, can guide you through situations where logic alone may fail. Ignoring those instincts can have serious consequences. Third, bravery comes in many forms. Courage is not just running into danger, it is speaking up, asking questions, and acting decisively to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Freya's bravery and my willingness to follow her lead demonstrated that courage often begins with small steps and attentive observation. Fourth, support networks are essential. I couldn't have managed the situation alone. Clara's immediate guidance and the swift action of the police were instrumental. In times of crisis, leaning on trusted friends and professionals can make a life or death difference. Collaboration and trust are invaluable. Fifth, empathy can transform lives. The moment I smiled at Sophie, hoping she felt she was no longer alone, I saw the fragile flicker of trust in her eyes. Showing compassion, even in terrifying circumstances, restores dignity and creates connection. Empathy can be as powerful as action itself. As the days passed, I made it a point to reflect with Freya, helping her understand that speaking her truth had immense power. We spent quiet evenings talking about courage, resilience, and the difference one person, no matter how small, can make. I wanted her to grow up knowing that honesty, bravery, and compassion were not abstract ideals but tools to protect and uplift others. This experience changed me as well. I realized the importance of truly listening, of observing even the smallest details, and of trusting both my instincts and my daughter's perspective. I had faced fear, uncertainty, and moral responsibility, and I emerged with a renewed appreciation for the delicate, powerful role we play in each other's lives. If there's one thing I hope anyone reading this will take away, it's that courage, compassion, and trust can ripple outward in unexpected ways. A child's voice can save a life, empathy can restore hope, and acting decisively in moments of fear can make the difference between despair and salvation. Thank you for following this story. If you found it inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to support more stories that celebrate bravery, truth, and the extraordinary power of human connection. Your engagement helps spread awareness of these lessons and encourages others to listen, act, and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Together, we can amplify voices that need to be heard and create a world where courage and empathy are always valued.